I'm your host, Amy Smith, and I'm excited to be here to have a discussion around the future of utilities. So today we're going to be diving into the digital transformation that's involved around utilities business models, also the role of data and expert integration solution approaches. And joining me today is Kelly James, who's the Vice President and General Manager of Energy and Utilities for Salesforce Industries. And also with me today is Jan Lindhaus, who's the Vice President and Head of Utilities for Capgemini, and Luke Stow, who's our expert resident panelist on the Reboot Show. So welcome everyone. I'd love to start with you, Jan, in terms of what are you seeing as some of the key challenges facing utilities businesses in the sector right now?
It's interesting time in the energy industry, and if you look across the value chain in the energy ecosystem, starting with power generation, decarbonization and sustainability are the top number one topic. Getting out of coal and how the transition to that ecosystem will go is dominating that segment of the value chain. In transmission and distribution, it's a major task to transform today's grid architecture and introduce new technologies that can deal with the change in supply. We have a dramatic fragmentation of new renewable energy sources getting into the system, and today's architecture is simply not able to cope with that. And it's a massive change, and data and digitization are a fundamental enabler of that change. And then on the retail side, it's the fight for the customer. It is all about lowest cost operations. It's about digital processes, flexibility, and protection of market share for the industry.
So I think you made a really good point there, Jan, around adopting new technologies. And I'd love to hear from you, Kelly, around what you've seen in terms of the changes that have happened in the industry over time and what role that SaaS products has played in that development.
I'll piggyback off what Jan said actually and kind of reinforce that digital transformation is driving so many things right now, decarbonization as well. And this distributed energy future, though it's the now really, it's here, right? So in all three of those drivers and plus the others that Luke mentioned, you see this need for the digital first and a service anywhere strategy right now. And so while distribution and grid companies are thinking about ways to balance and manage the grid in this new world, retail energy and really like all companies in this space, including disruptors coming in, are thinking about ways to engage that customer around the goals of the customer, which, are changing and are different. It used to be all about cost savings and just keep my lights on and keep the gas flowing. But now it's about show me value, show me answers to my questions that have to do with my carbon footprint, that have to do with my place in this world and in our climate future. Balance that with cost and comfort, and for businesses, really meet my goals, not just this year, but over the next 10 years of what I'm trying to do with my entire business. So all of those things are playing together. And it means really that you need, these businesses need platforms that can support that level of agility and change on the customer side, and that can give them the insights into the data that they have to serve those customers better and to do the things that we talked about on the grid side as well, data insights there. I think we'll get into that more. And I think the last thing I'll say there is actually in COVID-19, as this, continues to impact the entire world and to shift and change on us, I think all of these things have been reinforced and amplified there. So the need for that kind of digital first ability to serve and meet the customer anywhere is even more critical now, and the systems have to support that. So we're seeing acceleration in change and acceleration in adoption of cloud platforms.
I think that's an excellent point, and it's not just about the customer. The ecosystem that our clients need to handle is much more complex than in the past. It's not unilateral. It's the customer, it's new service partners, it's industry peers, it's the regulator, the policymaker, and the communities. And that's really a very complex CRM capability that needs to be established that goes way beyond what companies are used to in the past.
So given the importance of these stakeholder relationships, Luke, I'd love to hear from you in terms of the approach organisations should really be taking to enhance this collaboration so that we can avoid, for example, say one person leading the way and being crippled by other stakeholders.
Yeah, look, I think that's a really important question in this whole conversation, and Jan and Kelly make some great points. industry needs to be working together with regulators. The regulators play a big part in this industry, and therefore organisations that are in this industry need to engage with the regulator on a constant basis to ensure that they're in lockstep, particularly around customers. Customers have a say in this as well. They have requirements around access to information and data and insights for all particular reasons. And generation and also distribution parts of energy and water utilities, they also need to be involved as well. They have customers. I think this is the realisation that's happened over the last few years. They have customers and they need to engage so that they understand what's happening from a customer space as well. It's a really critical part of this industry.
I love your reference to customers as well and increasing the collaboration between everyone, in this business. And it would be great to hear from you, Jan. This is an industry with some legacy issues. So I'd love to hear around some of the challenges that these legacy issues really bring up for these utility businesses when they're looking to transform in this way.
Interesting one. And if we move from in technology, maybe in a second step, it's the people to start with. Because the industry is very conservative, it's very engineer and asset focused, and getting a customer mindset into not just the way you operate, but the way you think and the culture of the organization is a massive transformation. And we see those things getting absolute relevancy, that now there are executive general manager roles that grid operators are establishing, like Osgrid, that get another weight because they're reporting directly to the CEO. It's not just a secondary function that deals just with outages and communication, so much broader than that. So I think really having an executive sponsorship for driving that transformation in new ways of working and having that absolute buy-in that digital is the foundation for that is step number one. And then the second point is that the legacy systems that are there are outdated, they are badly integrated, and moving away from them is always hard. And just do a plug-and-play cloud solution doesn't work. It is transformational. I think the low-hanging fruit in digitization have been harvested. Now it's a much harder work where you need to think about end-to-end solutions and tight integrations.
So as we move away from these legacy systems, I'd love to hear from you, Kelly, in terms of how ERP solutions like Oracle and SAP are being integrated with newer technologies, and has the thinking around this evolved over time?
So this used to be seen as really difficult and risky and costly, really. To do anything other than really go with a full stack vendor for the CRM, the billing, the ERP, end to end kind of. And now that's really flipped, and it's certainly flipped in competitive open markets, and it's flipping in even the more regulated, vertically integrated sectors as well. So the reality now is that decoupling of the front office and the customer engagement and customer experience space is commonplace in other industries, and has become commonplace here. And it's more costly and risky kind of not to do that, to try to go with the old way and the custom way, than it is to do this. And to get a little technical, but the challenge of integration has really been overcome and kind of demystified. We have many of our customers that have gone with a Salesforce Industries CRM and customer experience front office, and have a SAP or Oracle billing system, middle office back-end system, and some there, the technology is there that allows to unlock with things that we're providing out of the box, and then also things like the MuleSoft platform, which is fantastic at unlocking legacy systems. But as a concept, it used to be that this was the scary, risky thing, and now it's sort of the commonplace, and folks that are looking at this as one system are kind of thinking about it in an older paradigm in that way.
And the customers are looking for nimble hybrid architectures, and they pick and choose systems that best suit their needs and the new capabilities that they want to develop. And that's more the interesting challenge, to unbreak these old school architectures and get a new platform, a digital core that then allows to plug and play with those solutions on the edges.
So Luke, Kelly raised a really interesting point there around how it used to be perceived very high risk to move away from these legacy systems. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around what's the real opportunity cost here if businesses just choose to ignore these new technologies?
Yeah, look, I think Jan put it well. These legacy systems have been around for some time, and they're quite old in the way that they work, particularly from a front-end engagement perspective. And I think a couple of challenges with the legacy type systems has been that organisations have used them not for the core functionality that they originally bought them for. So, billing systems being used as a CRM system, being used for marketing campaigns, being used for things that, originally that system wasn't built for. And so, decoupling that becomes a really important part of this picture. We've seen definitely those type of systems be used for the front end, building customer portals. And what that means is that there's a lot more manual intervention that goes into this. A lot more resources are required. It forces up the cost to serve. There's a lot more manual intervention. And therefore, automating these processes at the front end is really quite critical for organisations who are looking to make that change, engage with their customers, whether that be B2B or B2C, and ensure that the customer's actually, in the driver's seat for how that engagement is going to work. I mean, engaging with utilities is difficult anyway. You don't sit around your lounge room talking about how you want to engage with the energy or water utility. Quite frankly, there are other companies that are probably more forefront in your mind. So making it as easy and as an attractive proposition for the customer is really quite critical in this picture.
So it seems like the digital transformation is crucial, but there are still some challenges that businesses are facing within the space. So I'd love to hear from you, Jan. Given the high level of regulation in the sector, what's the role of government here in terms of supporting and developing these businesses to achieve that kind of transformation? And where does it get a little tricky?
That's a very interesting question. I think we could talk about that for hours because there's so many angles to it. I think on the positive side, protecting the critical infrastructure and having security, compliance, and force is absolutely valid, and that's the way the regulator, I think, does a pretty good job in providing that guidance and the asset security. Where it gets a bit more tricky is the compliance with the current energy system, because what we see happening is that the new compliance requirements take the oxygen out of organizations and do not allow them windows of opportunity to truly transform. So it's a continuous chasing of compliance. And especially if you have outdated systems, it takes you a very, very long time to implement those requirements. So I think absolutely the regulator has a responsibility, have the dialogue with all participants of the market to think about what is our roadmap here and how can we jointly reduce the overhead cost and redundancy cost that we obstruct on you by putting compliance requirements out there that have at times very limited value for the end consumer and drive the cost up. So I think it's that proactive dialogue that we're seeking, and it comes back to that relationship management, that there is a joint roadmap that allows all companies to develop customer focusing and development of new capabilities.
It's interesting because I get to work with the customers around the world on some of these challenges and exciting opportunities. And we're seeing some things, I've heard recently about some of the new regulations and directives around outage in Australia. We see some interesting things in the States too, that whereby the regulators in certain leading states are leaning in on creative approaches that traditionally the incentive structure in the States has to do with capital investment and infrastructure projects, right? And so there has been change over the past 5 years, and it continues to accelerate state by state, that basically strives to put the needs of customers and then creative solutions that incentivize renewable resources and other other creative structures that bring customers into the fold on a level playing field with those traditional investment structures and the traditional way utilities would invest in what they're doing. And they're getting some interesting results, and you're seeing some more and more creative programs come out of that in New York and in other leading states. And so I think encouraging that creativity, and some of that creativity, it doesn't sound super creative to us anymore, but means encouraging and making a level playing field for cloud software in the mix as well. And so we're seeing that in the U.S., which in some cases are behind some of these other companies who have countries who have really led, in Europe and the UK, in Australia, New Zealand, and other parts of the world. It's an interesting time for these incentives.
So that's a great point you raised there, Kelly, around those renewable energies. And I'd love to hear from you, Jan, in terms of does this really put pressure on businesses, given the increasing consumer awareness around the renewable energy space and sustainability? Is that forcing utilities businesses to have to adapt their products and services to match this growing awareness in the market?
It's an interesting one. It's always that the energy market has to balance price, reliability of supply, and safety, and that is it is always a compromise that drives that kind of conversation. What we see happening, if there is no, let's say, proactive evolution of services, the customer will do it themselves. No? If you look at states like South Australia, where the penetration of rooftop solar is through the roof, so to speak. Yeah. If communities don't see that they get price competitive and renewable energies, and they have a spirit of sustainability, they will build their own microgrids and together with partners and look for their own supply. And we see that across the world, that communities are starting that. So it's absolutely paramount from my perspective that there is an integrated approach where renewables are a fundamental element of the system and the services that providers offer to their customers. Otherwise, they will take it in their own hands.
It's a fascinating point you make there, Jan, around the customer really taking things into their own hands. And now, Luke, I know you speak on the show a lot around the empowered customer within the technology space. So when we're thinking about it in the context of the utilities and energy sector, what is the impact of this new empowered customer on these utilities businesses?
Yeah, look, I want to pick up on a couple of points that have been made, and I think Jan and Kelly have made this point really well. These businesses that we're talking about in terms of the utilities have been asset-focused organisations forever. The customer has only been sort of a new phenomena in terms of customers expecting, more insight, data, access to that data, and wanting to engage with energy utilities around, how to become more efficient in their electricity use, in their water usage, how to be better informed themselves about the opportunities and options they've got. And this is a difficult situation for these organisations that have been so focused on assets, and quite rightly, the assets have been the value of the business, still are. They've got massive investments in them, and they spend a lot maintaining them. And so these conversations, need to be held and need to be continued to be held, so that the institutionalisation that organisation has around assets is transferred somewhat towards customers. This is a difficult proposition. I've been certainly in board meetings where I've been pitching for customer funding for, customer engagement projects. And, you can see the head of engineering tapping his pen saying, well, I've got to spend, $50 to $100 million on upgrading and maintaining my assets. I'm not sure I want to give you any money to go and spend on customers. So this is a huge change required within the culture of utility businesses to focus on customers. They still have to focus on assets, but the customer is what's going to pay the bills. And that is something that needs to be understood and discussed within utilities.
Yeah, and I love how you reference the data there, because I think that brings us into a really exciting part of the conversation. We know that many businesses across technology specifically, and utilities and energy sector as well, are using data to make better data-driven decisions. So I'd love to hear from you, Kelly, in terms of the role that data is playing in the sector and how both businesses and customers are using data to make better decisions.
Definitely. I tweak one thing Luke said just a little bit. I believe that customers want more, you said data, that's fair. Customers want more specific insights when they want it, in the way they want it, right then, in order for them to make a decision. And that applies to your residential consumer customer base, as well as the business and commercial and industrial customer base. It takes on slightly different flavors in each, but we see utilities and energy companies that have the data locked in either external third-party systems or in back office systems, and they can surface and get certain things out of that, but they really still struggle to cross over into truly creating insights from that and to using it to its kind of full extent to generate the type of information they need to solve some of the problems that we've already talked about, to solve for insights into managing the grid, and to solve for insights into answering that customer core question of, I am looking for value on my terms like this. If I'm a business customer, I want to balance my cost of energy with my own carbon footprint, with my plan for the future. And I want you to give me advice on what I should do with my fleet of vehicles over time and possibly convert them to electric vehicles, and how that would look. That's a much more complex question than before. And you need the right data and analytics across multiple sites and multiple business units to do that in some cases, to really package that up. And so talking about the retail energy providers, they're in a competitive race to win the business of that customer. And then if you're kind of pivoting to the consumer customer base, the residential customer base, that looks like, not just a race on price and managing margins, which you're doing on both sides, business and consumer, but it looks now like, okay, bundle some value in here with me. Talk to me about all of the things that I want to do. And products and services with those partners that we were talking about before as well. And so kind of back to the core question, which was data. You need all of this data and turn it into insights to then be the right kind of advisor to a customer. And then to do it, depending on whether you're in a consultative relationship with a very large business, to do it in a managed relationship way, or to do it with a residential customer in tiny bursts and in marketing on the website, and in those few minutes that you have their attention between homeschool and other things that they're working on right now.
So do you think, Kelly, like generally speaking in this sector, a business is becoming smarter at the way that they use their data?
I would say they are trying to become smarter, yes, and they're getting there. And so a lot of what we're doing with Salesforce Industries and the Energy and Utilities Cloud is about taking the data that's there and surfacing it to the right user at the right time, and then taking that from there and generating insights, as well as extracting from other third parties who are also generating smart information from that data. I guess I'd also throw it to Jan, who's working with many of these customers as well. What are you seeing? Like, where do you see companies on the maturity curve here?
I think it varies, and we see that across the globe. It really depends on the risk appetite, and I think also the forward thinking of the leadership team of our customers. And the data question ties back to the regulatory question really well. If we look at what is required to manage tomorrow's energy system, it is such a complex hierarchical structure of microgrids that are privatized, of community grids, of the renewables, of battery storage, and the new grid architecture. And all of that can only be managed via data and via standards that go across the system, which the regulator needs to drive. And we see pockets of, let's say, excellence, where companies are trying with new DERM solution, for example, to manage parts of their grids much more flexible and digital, sharing that data, obviously then also informing their asset management strategies, etc. So we see, repeating myself a bit, we see those pockets of excellence. There is no integrated end-to-end view yet, and I think that's still a long way to go.
So as we move towards this end-to-end approach, if you like, and utilities businesses are getting smarter and more sophisticated with the ways in which they're using data, I'd love to hear from you, Luke, in terms of some of the security considerations that this brings up, particularly given how crucial this sector is to any economy.
Before I get to answering the security question, there's a couple of areas of focus here. One is at the sort of operational end, and the other is at the more front end. Just to pick up on the point that was being made, I think the decoupling here is a really important part of the conversation, because when you're decoupling, I really feel like Salesforce industry, platforms have got real capability here in helping automate those. This is about providing the right information to your front end people for the moments that matter with your customers. I often think about energy and water utilities being data rich but insight poor. What's the right information that needs to be at the front end at the right moment for your people to make a difference when they're servicing customers? And that goes the same for generation and asset part of the business, who I think have customers, someone paying invoices when they do provide services and provide product. And therefore, I think the same should be said about the generation and asset management part of the businesses. But getting on to security, I think really important here is, we are in an era where IoT, industrial Internet of Things, 5G capabilities, the amount of devices, we've got SCADA systems that are in all the asset locations and looking at, performance of assets, which is all critical infrastructure and critical data for utilities to run. All of this means that it's more open. It's more open and it's valuable to those who want to try and control it and get the information. So really critical in this is that the organisations are choosing technologies which have some security and compliance already built into them, and they're choosing appropriate network and providers. Every single security person I've seen in the utility has either had no hair or grey hair, if you know what I mean. Like, these people have a tough job. There's a lot going on in these environments. There's a lot of safety requirements in utilities, as we've discussed. And therefore, those people are fronting up to the boards, week after week, giving reports on how secure the environments are, and particularly that back end, which is valuable to those who want to get hold of it. And so making sure that, upgrades are being made, patches are being run, that they've got the appropriate platforms to monitor and look at what's happening, and also that they've got, being able to complete penetration testing on a regular basis. These are all fundamental things, foundational things that utilities need to have in place from a security point of view.
Considering the advances that we're seeing in the digital and automation space in general, are there other businesses out there that may be better equipped from a customer centricity point of view in terms of their technology capabilities that could potentially look to move into this?
Yeah, look, I think there are, and let's just pick up on what the utilities are doing, and then we can probably answer that question. So, what we've seen is that customers are really trying to understand how they engage with the energy utilities and water utilities. What is it that we're engaging you for? And so this is an interesting question. From a utilities perspective of working out, well, what are we to our customers, and what do we want to be for our customers? So we've seen in Europe a shift away from offering lots of different types of products and services to just really simplifying it down to, we just offer one type of electricity plan or one type of water plan, and we have a really simple billing process for you to engage with us on. In other areas, what we've seen is a complete shift from that, where utilities are offering, health products, insurances, and therefore trying to bundle lots of different products and services into their offering. So what this means is, the war for customer and retention of customer is strong in this sector. Churn is a real problem for utilities. It costs a lot of money to get those customers back, and comparators who have a job of basically offering customers a different choice churn customers on purpose. They want to churn customers. That's their role in the marketplace, giving customers other options. So to compete and win in this space, what we're seeing is utilities starting to offer much more range of product and services, and therefore having to have that capability within their own business. And yes, there are other organisations like telecommunications company, like health providers, like insurance, like comparators themselves, who have the capability of being able to offer a much leaner and a better experience for customers. And so therefore moving into that space from a front end point of view, they don't have to have the assets. They can just control the narrative and the engagement with the customer, and therefore they're able to compete and win against the utilities in that space. So this is a real battleground for customer, and I only see that continuing to happen. And look, sustainability is an important factor in that. It's one of the ways that the utilities businesses can differentiate themselves from others and potential threats in that marketplace.
Kelly brought up a really interesting point earlier around the consumer and their high level of awareness that they now have in terms of the data they have, say, for instance, with their usage levels. So I'd love to hear from you, Jan, in terms of having that increased awareness from a consumer point of view, how is that impacting them in terms of their perceptions around sustainability and their purchasing decisions? And is this different across different countries around the world?
It's another interesting facet, especially in Australia, because primarily over the last years, it was all about energy cost and consumers didn't really care where the energy came from. I think this has changed, especially when we look at 2019, the warmest year recorded in history in Australia with 2.1 degrees above average. And the extreme bushfires that we've been facing has raised the awareness for sustainability. And if we, for example, take a glimpse at Europe, we've got corporates in Europe that would not work with companies like Capgemini if we are not committed to sustainability and carbon neutrality. So there is a sentiment growing both on the consumer side as well as on the business side. We want to have sustainability. So if the supplier that I'm choosing is not behind sustainability and can give me price competitive alternative offers with flexibility, I might jump ship. We see very interesting in Victoria, for example, where the tier 2 retailers are grabbing market share. We've had 15% of market share with the tier 2 retailers in Victoria, as opposed to other states where it's only 5%. So there's definitely momentum, and customers are willing to change. They know it's not hard, and they can pick and choose what they want. So it is about that sentiment development and definitely driving the customer choice.
So it's a great point you raised there around the sentiment development. And I think we've talked about, high churn rates and customer retentions as being a really integral part of this conversation. So I'd love to hear from you, Kelly, from a leadership point of view. What can leaders really be doing in order to future-proof their utilities business models? And to Jan's point, what do they need to be mindful of in terms of new entrants coming into the market that potentially threaten these models?
And picking up on what Jan said, sustainability and the way a business approaches that is it's critical these days. As you say, you're not doing business without it. It's we see all utilities around the world very conscious of this, and energy retailers sort of building their businesses on this platform. I mean, Salesforce, just as a company, is signed up to the UN sustainability goals, and it's a core part of our basically one of our fundamental values, which is about equality, climate equality, and equality across all kinds of those different goals. But I guess on that point, to bring it back to what can the sector do to continue to future-proof business models here. I think the continued, recognition of convergence in the space. You brought up a couple of really key points. Looking, in fact, one specific example in British Gas and Centrica in the UK, a customer that we're working with. Many people don't already know they're one of the largest insurance providers in the UK already. This is the kind of thing that these companies have done for many years. But back to, I think, a point Luke made, it's data with not necessarily insights and different business lines without kind of a singular view across treating a customer like a single customer that has a set of goals. So convergence and keeping an eye on that and keeping in mind towards what that looks like for a customer. And then, some fundamentals, bringing it back to people again, aligning the business and the IT stakeholders around that customer, aligning across the organization. If you're, an energy retailer coming into a space, you have an aggressive strategy around this, most likely. If you're a traditional utility and you're trying to work in this space, really aligning around what's going to be core to your brand and your ability to continue to interact with your customers and with integrity and with them in mind. And then on the technology side, once you've aligned around a common kind of set of goals and a strategy, choosing a platform approach is important, and choosing a set of companies to work with that are going to be strategic for you, that are going to be agile for you, and that are going to allow you to change with the pace of that strategic roadmap that you have. But with a singular platform, that doesn't mean you're kind of reinventing and spending all your money and stitching things together versus actually kind of growing with the pace that the market's moving now. Those are the key things. Those are the things that we're trying to do. And looking to companies that are really innovating and operating at that speed that the utility industry has to move to now.
I've never felt more excited as an energy consumer before. And, you know, I'm mindful of time, but Luke, I'd love to kick off with you in terms of just wrapping up around what you're really seeing as what the future of utilities really looks like.
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of really key points that I've, learned out of today. And I think one of those is, look, Salesforce Industry Tools platform, basically it comes with a lot of capabilities here that make a huge difference. So the data models and the automation available through that type of capability, just allows the front end, the marketing and sales team to pivot quickly, to be able to make offers, to be able to bundle things together or simplify, messaging out to consumers and engagement with consumers, I think is fundamental. Cost to serve, cost to acquire, cost to retain, and churn are massive, massive KPIs in these businesses. And being able to tackle those head on with automation and capability through data models, I think is really quite critical. And the second thing I'd say is partnerships. We've got to remember that these organizations are hundreds of years old and have been focused on assets. And while that'll continue, I think the shift to customer means that they need partners who can help them execute in this space and execute well. This isn't a core capability of the organizations and of the industry. And so being able to leverage that, on a global scale, I think is really quite critical to this positioning and being able to do it successfully. Yeah, so they're my couple of key takeaways.
Yeah, I think being able to leverage that technology and those partnership relationships has been key in this conversation. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, Jan, in terms of what do you see as the future of utilities?
Building on Luke's comments. So if you look at Australia, in 10 years, we will be far, far greener. So the move out of coal is happening. And regardless of the fact that bilateral agreement is still not achieved and political direction is not clear, it's happening. And it will continue to happen. I'm also convinced that electric vehicles will take uptake in metropolitan areas. Absolutely, that's coming. And it'll be interesting to see how the roles will shift and who really will be the orchestrator of the energy future. So I think what is AMO doing, what are the distributors doing, and how does retail evolve in that whole landscape is for me still a bit unclear. And I think it's evolving and it's a kind of a watch this space. I think whoever is smartest in understanding the end-to-end value chain from the SCADA system, from the integration of renewables to the end consumer, think about the data that, is the foundation of all of that and represents that end-to-end value chain and is able to orchestrate that. That's the one that will lead the pack.
It'll be really interesting to see how those stakeholder roles will develop over time. So I'd love to hear from you as well, Kelly, in terms of what are your thoughts when it comes to the future of utilities?
Convergence and partnerships, you guys have both mentioned, and I really couldn't agree more. At Salesforce Industries, we actually cover nearly 20 industries at this point and growing. And when we look across some of those, I sit with my counterparts in the automotive industry, in the oil and gas industry, in healthcare, in insurance, in telecommunications, and all of these industries kind of actually come together quite to a point around key things that we've talked about today. I mean, 5G is critical here. Electric vehicles, the rolling battery that you're driving around that has all of the features of your phone, right? I can upgrade my car right now, and that's amazing, right? And so what does the future look like for the customer? It looks like paying attention to and react and kind of taking advantage of the convergence. If you're in the position to consolidate some of these things and offer a better value and service to the customer, that's great. If it's with a kind of a more traditional utility or distribution company and you're looking at partnerships around this and working, as Jan spoke of before, to really continue to provide that right level of service and that right, the reliability and safety that we've counted on for so many years, but taking that up a notch with all of these different, distributed energy components coming into play and these other providers. I think it looks like creative partnerships for better serving customers going forward. There's a lot out there, but looking to companies who've kind of done it before, done it across multiple industries, and looking to other industries. There are definite lessons learned in some of the other industries out there. So I think it's a really exciting time, and you're going to see clear leaders emerge.
Certainly seems like there's some exciting times ahead, and I for one have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation today. We've had some expert insights and a very holistic view around the utility sector, both from a business point of view and a customer point of view as well. So if you're in the audience, I really hope you've enjoyed this segment today as much as we have, and I would urge you, if you're interested in digital transformation, to reach out to Salesforce Industries and Capgemini today. It's been great to have you on the panel. Thank you so much, Luke, Jan and Kelly. And make sure, if you've enjoyed this segment, don't forget to subscribe to the Reboot Show, and we'll be looking forward to the next segment soon.